welcome to the Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. I am, as usual, Jodelle, and I got into a book recently that I couldn't put down and I couldn't stop thinking about, and I even couldn't help but implement a little bit in my own life. And so I had to reach out to the author of this book, and Professor Spira is kind enough to join me today on the podcast. He is a renowned expert on the way of eating that many of us may have not been familiar with until today, until this podcast. So he's joining me and will enlighten us to something called the Mucus-less Diet. So Professor Spira is an author, a musician, which I definitely want to talk about, and founder of the Mucus-free Life LLC, and holds a PhD in musicology and African American studies, including a course that I looked up that he taught that was called The Power of Black Sacred Music, which sounds amazing. But he's most known for his elaborate understanding of an age-old healing system called the Mucusless Diet Healing System by Professor Arnold Ehret, originally written, and I have this book, in 1922. And I've read over and over. I'm fascinated by this book. I've also read over and over your book, Professor Spira, which gave me a much greater understanding of the mucus-free healing system. And I love that you're dedicated to inspiring folks to pursue physiological liberation through a clean diet. I love that. Mm-hmm. So after a long intro, welcome, Professor Spira.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So there's a lot to unpack here about the mucus-free diet, since many listening may not be familiar with it. This is something that's not mainstream, right, and it's pretty old school nutrition according to what's out there today, which I love. But let's start with you in a brief synopsis of your understanding of the need for a mucus-free life and what brought you to a mucus-free life, kind of your brief history of what brought you to being mucus-free, so to speak.
Definitely. So growing up, I was always sick. I had chronic migraine headaches all the time. They even had medicine in the school nurse's office. And almost every day when I would go to school, from elementary school into high school, I would have to go at some point during the day to the nurse's office, take an Advil or Tylenol, lay down for 15 minutes to try to get the headache to go down and go back to class. And that was a daily kind of experience. I was walking around the halls with boxes of tissues, blowing my nose constantly. Got chronic bronchitis year after year. And I assumed that was just my plight in life, that because I had a very sick mother, that as I was growing up, she was in and out of the hospital all the time. And when I was in 6th grade, she passed away. I was also raised by my grandmother until my 4th grade, and she was I had the mother-son connection with her, and she died while I was in 4th grade. So I was exposed to a lot of this sickness and pain, and I just thought that, the buzz idea is it's genetics. You were born with that. You're going to have these diseases. Your mom had diabetes and had her legs amputated from gangrene, and and I watched all of this happen as a young person going in the hospital. So I had from society, I had kind of tried to program myself to believe that, to say, I guess this is just how it's going to be. I'm just going to be sick all the time. When I was 18 years old, I got a CPAP unit for sleep apnea, where you can't breathe. You're not getting enough oxygen at night when you're sleeping. And so I accepted it, that at the same time I was searching for answers from a young age. I wanted to find answers to some of these great questions. What is the source of human illness? What's the source of human suffering? And I mean, I used to go through, when I was in elementary school, books on slavery and the Holocaust. And for some reason, I was really wanted to try to understand why people do some of the things that they do. That's some of the worst things in humanity. And so once I graduated high school, I got into College Conservatory of Music, University of Cincinnati, to study jazz trombone performance. And it was during this time when I met a guy by the name of Willie Smart, aka Brother Air, who had practiced the Mucusless Diet at that time for over 20 years. And he never really, I knew him for about a year. He had never really talked a whole lot about his lifestyle, but there's one fateful day, we're at a jam session, and it was my friend Ryan, a saxophone player. I got my trombone. Willie's a drummer. And it was in between sets, and at these jam sessions, this particular one, they have a spread of food, and they had the chicken wings and all kinds of stuff. So I'd had a plate of this food, and so we're sitting there talking, and I'm eating, and I see his face change. It's like it's almost as if like he's I got to talk about it. I can't hold it back any longer. So he started telling me and my friend about the mucusless diet, but doing it in a way, in a Socratic way, where you kind of ask questions that lead you logically to the answers. And so during the course of the conversation, I was slower and slower eating these chicken wings, to the point where I was just looking down at the plate like, and stopped eating. And we talked even after the jam session. We talked for another several hours, just standing outside of the club had closed and everything. We just standing outside talking. So soon after that, I went and got a copy of the Mucusless Diet Healing System book. And after that, it totally changed my life, changed the way that I thought about diet, the way that the philosophy about what we are as humans, our potentials, what back to nature really means. And I just started to dedicate myself to that path of, and most importantly, the path of transition. So I didn't force myself to do things. This wasn't a real extremist kind of thing where some people think it is a very methodical, transitional methodology that I was able to understand and plug into. And within 6 months, I'd lost about 100 pounds back, because I was around 300 pounds at that point. And when I started the diet, so I lost about 100 pounds, and all those ailments went away. I never had another case of bronchitis. My headaches went away. The allergies that I had for years and years went away. Got off my allergy medication, got off the CPAP unit, all that stuff. And I just kept going. I really got passionate about wanting to share this information with other people, because I knew how many people this can help. And it's so simple. In the principles of it is simple. What makes it complex is what people bring to it. Exactly. So people bring a lot of belief systems and paradigms and all the misinformation. And so that makes the educational process from our end of trying to help people understand things a little bit more difficult. But the system itself is very simple and very logical. And so once you can get into it, it makes life a lot easier. But that's how I got into it. It was came through the music. That was one of the things that really stuck with me that Brother Ehret told me was, you aspire to be a great musician, and I aspired to be one of the best jazz trombonists in the world. I was like, that was a goal. And he said, doesn't it make sense for you to clean up the true instrument, which is the body? So we spend all this time trying to work on whatever instrument we're studying, but we often neglect, and many musicians neglect to deal with the true instrument, which is the body. The body, mind, and spirit. It's all here. And if this is obstructed, then it makes whatever the music you are inspired to produce and your skills and that kind of stuff, it's going to be reflected there. And so when I started going down the mucus-free path, it totally just evolved my creativity, my ability to really think way outside the box, practice better, my musical skills, all of those things really were greatly enhanced when I started going down this road.
Wow, fantastic. It's just interesting, your story, because mine, it was a little bit similar. My mom was real sick when I was in high school, and then I lost her at 18 or 17, right when I graduated. And then it's like when you lose key people in your life, it's like you keep asking why, and then you kind of want to find the answer for yourself so that A, it doesn't happen to you, and B, why did it happen to them? And what can I do to prevent it to happen to other people that I care about? Maybe there's something I can learn. So I feel that within you. That's really cool. I think the main thing that I love about your philosophy is the transition, which we're going to get to. It's like there's so much in today's diet world where people are all or nothing. It has to be like, if I'm going to do a program, I'm going to do it like I'm going to jump in head first and throw everything in my pantry away and start over. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so before we get into the mucusless diet, I want to like reiterate that, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more. But can you brief us on who Arnold Ehret was and his philosophy too?
Yes. Yeah. Arnold Ehret, similarly where he was really deathly ill at one point. So he was born in Baden, Germany, to a middle class kind of family. They had a little bit of money, and he grew up and became an artist. So his professorship is in drawing. He was a professor of drawing in the old German academic system, the way they, awarded degrees and professorships. So he was a professor of drawing, and he got drafted for the military, and he ended up getting let go there because he was very sick. He got deathly ill. They diagnosed him with Bright's disease, which is inflammation of the kidneys, kidney issues. And he had went to all these different doctors all around Europe that all told him the same thing. We can't help you. Basically said that you're going to die. And so he started to investigate some of the more what we would call naturopathic methods now. And he got a little relief because there would be improved diets. There was some vegetarian retreats or a couple little fasting things, but nothing really methodical or, where he would ultimately take it. So he noticed that he got relief, but he never got healing. So at one point, he just sort of almost threw his hands in the air and just said, you know what, I'm going to stop eating. And he did a fast. And within 2 weeks, he felt better than he had felt in many years. So in his mind, from that experience, he starts putting things together like, well, wait a minute. If I'm not eating anything, I didn't die, and I'm getting better, then logically what is going on? I'm healing myself through this not eating process, through this fasting process. And so armed with that knowledge, he kept going, continued to experiment on himself, on his own body, and ultimately would work in a sanitarium, then have his own sanitarium over in Europe. And this is at the birth of what would be called the back to nature renaissance, or the back to nature movement that came out of Switzerland and Germany in the late 1800s. And so this was a time when now you're starting to see is basically a countercultural answer to the heavy industrialization in Germany, Switzerland, Europe at that time. And so you start to see nudist colonies coming up, the vegetarian communes, fruit eating groups of people. All these things are starting to bubble up, and Ehret is right in the middle of all of this. So after having a lot of success healing people at the sanitariums, and he wrote some papers, and he became fairly well known, especially in health circles over in Europe, to the point where people had to say they were either Ehretists or non-Ehretists. And this was the medical people in the medical profession. Now, around this 1914, Ehret came over to the United States, and he didn't plan on staying, but World War I erupted, and which prevented him from going back. So he had come in to Southern California, and so he stayed there, and he ultimately met Fred Hirsch, who became his publisher and business partner and friend. Healed Fred Hirsch. Fred Hirsch had an infection of the Achilles, a bone infection, And again, they told him he wasn't going to die. And Ehret looked at him and said, work with me and I'm going to get you off those crutches. So that was that's a beautiful testimonial that you can actually read about that. And there's an article called Still Ehret. It's on my website, mucus-freelife.com. But so over in America, he started to build his name, had a sanitarium over here in Southern California, and things were going great. And you started publishing. First, it was Rational Fasting, and Crank-a-Menschen's is a German writing that he had before Rational Fasting came out. And he's in the process of putting together what ultimately would be the compilation that is the Mucusless Diet Healing System. But tragically, in 1922, he was 56 years old. No one knows exactly what happened, but the story is that after a sold out lecture, because he was giving these sold out lectures at that time, and people were, because they were just like, man, this is the results are here. You know, people are really getting healed. And so he was walking, it was like nighttime. He was totally by himself, and he was walking in a foggy, oil drenched cobblestone street, and supposedly tripped and fell, or kind of slipped and fell back on the back of his head and had a basal fracture. So that's the story. Some of us that's in the Mucusless diet community think that you have a conspiracy, there was some foul play involved, because it doesn't add up, because no one saw it. Fred Hirsch is the one that found him. And it's just very, very strange, because he was right at the pinnacle. Like if it another couple years, and Ehret would have been more popular than a Sigmund Freud. But ultimately, Arnold Ehret's work, Fred Hirsch kept it in print, and so that kind of brings us up to the present time. But yeah, Ehret's, the legacy is very, very important. Part of my mission has been to bring Ehret's work back to the forefront, because there's so many people that are into things that they have no clue originated with Arnold Ehret. As far as I can tell, Ehret coined the term intermittent fasting. Now, today, people use that word all over the place. There's no evidence of that word, of those two words being used in that context before the Mucusless Diet Healing System or rational fasting. And so that's part of my mission, is to bring that kind of stuff to people's awareness. It's like, okay, you're into that, but look at the original and see, because it has been watered down, or the concepts oftentimes have changed, and usually not for the better. And so it's like, all right, let's go back to the source material, and let's see what the originator had to say about the concepts. But yeah, Arnold Ehret, he's to me, just that his work, it stands alone. It stands, not by no means perfect. And I address problems and contradictions and that kind of stuff, but in terms of the methodology, the message, the vision, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, you can sense his passion in his book for helping people, and you can sense your passion in your book. So we'll have the links in the show notes for people to check out both books. I mean, his book's kind of hard to find. I had to find it on eBay, the original one, but yours is not. So, but speaking of that, let's unpack what exactly the mucus-free diet is and the mucus-free life. And also, I love to talk about mucus-lean, because that's part of that transition we were mentioning.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So the Mucusless Diet Healing System is a dietary therapy methodology that systematically combines several different elements. You have the dietary element, but you also have, I call them ancillary therapies, your colon irrigation, your enemas and colonics, exercise, breath work. But it's how you put all these things together. So on the diet side, how you combine the food, how many times you eat per day. These are all things that are addressed in the Mucusless Diet Healing System. the transition diet, which is a hugely important aspect of this process, is gives you the tools and the methodology to be able to gradually transform your diet and in turn your physiology over time so that you can make permanent changes.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the fasting aspect. That's the other part of the system, and rational fasting. So we're not. He criticizes long-term water fast or people that say that you shouldn't drink or eat anything. He takes a very moderate kind of approach, understanding that if you want to kick it up a notch, or if somebody needs to be more aggressive, you can always be more aggressive, but it's better to kind of be in the middle of the road and find that plateau point that's comfortable for you and is safe for you, as opposed to trying to push yourself so hard that it's uncomfortable when it doesn't need to be. But so in a kind of a big nutshell, that's pretty much the Mucusless Diet Healing System. And I always emphasize healing system, that this is the one of the, if not, I can't think of too many other systems, unless they were inspired by the Mucusless Diet Healing System. There's not a whole lot of other diets that really come across as systems. And so that's a key difference here. So it's not, as I like to tell people, it's not a food list diet. So I can't just send you a food list of naughty foods and good foods and say that, okay, just eat the foods on this list. That doesn't work. It is customizable to each individual person's situation. And so that's what I really love about it. For some people, that can be a challenge because they want something that's more rigid. It's almost like they want somebody to just tell them, well, what can I eat? What can I not eat? And so those folks, sometimes we have to help them with that mentality, to say that you have to work with yourself, you work with your body, you work with your diet, and explore, because there should be a explore and discovery. It should be fun, as opposed to a chore. And so but that's pretty much the Mucusless Diet Healing System in a nutshell.
So people might be wondering then, okay, mucusless or mucus-free, like what's the symptoms of having too much mucus in the body? Like what should they be looking out for? Because according to, when you read these books, it's like we all could benefit from this. It's not just like certain people have mucus and certain people don't.
Yeah. And I should make the clarification that I always have to make, is mucus that is created from mucus-forming foods and the residue that's left over is different. There's a relationship, but it's different from the mucus that is secreted by your mucosa or mucous membrane. Exactly. And so if the example I like to give is the one that's in the Mucusless Diet book, where if you take a piece of white bread, submerge it into water for 3 hours, and right next to it have some water, and maybe crush up some strawberries or grapes or something and put that in the water, let them sit there for 3 hours. Which one of those would you want to eat? Would you want to eat that soggy, nasty kind of mucusy bread? Or would you want and people do that for infusions anyway. They put the fruit in the water. Would you want the fruit that's been sitting in the water that has not turned to slime?
Exactly.
Mucus-forming foods are ones that ultimately degrade into slimy substances that we call mucus. What happens in the body? You eat these mucus-forming foods, and then the other people will say, yeah, but we got digestive fluids and that takes care of it. It's like, well, it doesn't take care of all of it. And you end up with this layer of uneliminated, undigested food substance and residue from the mucus-forming foods that over time creates plaquing, backs up in GI tract. And then on top of that, you have folks that have 32 feet of impacted intestines, and so where there's pounds and pounds of uneliminated fecal matter in the bowels. And if you can think back, this stuff over time builds up. So there's decades old feces stones. And I saw this kind of stuff come out of me when I started the diet. In the slime ropes, the mucoid plaque, as people call them. You have your tapeworms. All that stuff is in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know why people get weirded out by it when they see pictures of it, because it's in everybody. And so it's like, is the picture make you not feel good, or the fact that it is actually in you is unpleasant? But so we got to make that distinction. There's a difference. There are foods that can elicit that mucosal response. You drink milk. Most people know that milk causes phlegm. The body reacts with the phlegm. So that's a double whammy, because something like that, it's going to elicit that secretion of mucus for the body to try to protect itself. And at the same time, that stuff is going to be creating a really viscous, slimy residue in your GI tract that, again, over time, that's why there's so much, I didn't even realize how much colon cancer there is. You look at some of these statistics. It's no wonder, though, when you have all these acids, all this waste, decades and decades of filth that's down in the colon, down in the lower intestines, of course you're going to have problems. Of course your back's going to hurt. You're going to be blowing your nose. You're going to be sick all the time. And don't be fooled by the fact that the mad scientists and mad chemists have come up with all of these concoctions that can help take away a few of your symptoms to make you feel a little better. So something's happening. Here's some pills. And okay, I feel a little better for a while, but that's going to always end in some kind of chronic illness, because you're not allowing your body to go through the elimination process that it is trying to go through. So mucus forming foods, because that's usually the question, what foods are mucus forming and are not mucus? So mucus forming foods are dairy products, grains, and starches. Now, when we say pus forming, those are going to be your animal products, because they degrade into a very viscous kind of slime that we define as pus. And I know there's a couple different definitions. There's the infected tissue definition of pus, but in this case, we're looking at, if you take a chicken leg and let that thing just sit there and it degrades, that really concentrated slime, we call that pus, because it's so much more dangerous than that slimy bread that we talked about in the water. I mean, there's a world apart between the slimy water bread and this very concentrated form of mucus that decaying dead animal flesh turns into. And so those are the pus forming things, your dairy, meat, fish, that kind of stuff. And then the mucus forming items are grains, starches, fatty things, that kind of stuff. Now, then people say, well, that's everything. That's almost everything I eat. Well, it's not fruits and vegetables,
right?
But it's there. When you read the system, it's also not rigid. It's also, we're not saying that you have to get rid of all of those things. Not all mucus forming foods are made equally. Mm-hmm. And so some of them are perfect to use on the transition. And as you mentioned, mucus-lean kind of items, because I ate a lot of stuff that people are surprised that I ate when I was getting started with the mucusless diet. So I would have these huge meals with the 100% wheat spaghetti. So I'd make this 100% wheat spaghetti, these big tomato sauces, have my big raw salad. But the key was, mechanically, I never ate mucus by itself. I always combined it with raw salad and some kind of cooked vegetables. So that made it eliminate a lot better. And so for us, that's a key term to think about, is elimination. That's really how we judge the how well a food item fits into the transition diet and into your life. Is, does this item eliminate well, meaning you eat it, there's no acid reflux? there's no other, doesn't make you feel terrible in your stomach. In a timely fashion, you can, you have your bowel movement and it seems like it comes out, you wipe and it's not real, there's not a lot of slime residue there. Those are the kind of things that we can evaluate, because you notice the cleaner you get, the less residue there is, the easier the bowel movements are, everything is flowing a lot better once you get to that point. But yeah, I ate a lot of things, that were definitely mucus forming, and I detail some of that stuff in my book Spira Speaks. But that's the mucus forming foods versus the non-mucus forming foods, which are the fruits and vegetables.
Yeah. Well, and I think even subtle things that people don't think about, like a chronic cough after you eat, like just chronically kind of clearing your throat and chronically coughing. Or like you mentioned, poo. Like I would tell my clients, like if your poo is sticking to the toilet on the way down, that's mucus. And things like even skin issues. I feel like there's even like dry skin and dandruff that can come out as like we have excess mucus, and these foods could be contributing to that. And so, I mean, what about puffiness? Like so many people are talking about like puffy eyes and puffy face and water retention. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, inflammation. So mucus forming foods, pus and mucus forming foods always become acid forming foods. So there's some people that really focus a lot on that, acid, like what's acid forming foods. What we have to understand is when you have enough constipation that things are backing up, stuff is not flowing properly, acidosis is going to happen eventually somewhere, and you hope that your body doesn't have it happen in certain places to harm your glands, to harm your certain organs. You do not want that inflammation there. But if you're backing up, or if you got edema in the legs, and that's weak kidneys, the kidneys might not be filtering well. But that's the systemic. I mean, in all these issues, you're probably going to have kidneys that you need to get your kidneys together, and that's a whole other discussion in terms of. But it's all part of this process. Whether if you're juicing and doing the green juices and fasting, improving your diet, all of these things systematically work synergistically with one another, and that's the key. So it's not just focusing on one thing, because that's another thing a lot of folks have noticed, or they try to focus on one thing as the end all be all, most important part. So they'll focus all on fasting. Like, okay, I'm just gonna fast, or they focus all on trying to eat fruit and do these fruit fasts, or focus all on doing enemas or whatever it is. And transition diet is usually the last thing that they focus on. So that's why I talk about it so much. But yeah, the puffiness, the inflammation. When we evaluate people using Arnold Ehret's diagnostic methodologies, it's very simple, yet I've noticed a lot of naturopaths really don't use it. They very complicated methods that can work, but I just love the simplicity of Ehret's diagnostic method, where first and foremost, I want to hear about the symptoms.
Exactly.
I don't need to know the disease. I mean, you can tell me what you were diagnosed with, but I don't need to know the terminologies. The symptoms are what's most important to understand, and recommendations can be made based on the symptoms that people are experiencing.
Absolutely.
And once you understand, based on those symptoms, the best advice to give, whether it be to fast or to eat more. Sometimes I have to recommend that people, you actually need to be eating more because they're not eating enough of something. It all comes down to the same thing, and I totally agree with Ehret, where it's all constipation, but not just bowel constipation, but systemic constipation throughout the entire system.
I think that was the part in his book that, like, immediately when I read that, I was like, whoa, this guy knows his stuff. Like, I had never thought of constipation on a systemic level. I thought of it, I dealt with it with clients on the bowel level, but when you see puffiness under someone's eye, that's constipation. Their whole system is clogged up. And when I read that, I was like, okay, this guy's onto something here. And I love that you are all about the symptoms. When somebody comes to me and hands me blood work, I'm like, that's fine, I'll look at it. But what symptoms don't lie. Like, what have you been dealing with for the past 6 months, years, 3 years, you know, that is ongoing, that won't stop? Every day a headache, every day a migraine, every day bloating and discomfort. That's not normal. Like, the human body should be able to eat a wide variety of foods and digest them. The human body should not be in pain every day.
Right.
So, and I think that there's more to this mucus and this total systemic constipation than people are recognizing. And that's why I think this is really important, what you're talking about. So you mentioned like the most mucus causing foods. What are maybe some lesser obvious ones? Like, I've heard you talk a lot about avocado.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I used to make people real mad because I pointed out that avocados are mucus forming. Now, I didn't say that you can't use them. And I didn't say that I don't use them sometimes, you know, use them to make a dressing or something like that. But I don't know how people are still doing it now, but like 4 or 5 years ago, people were having meals of avocados. They had like 4 avocados. And I was like, wait a minute now, come on, guys. So that's why I kind of came out a little aggressive on that. But for transitional purposes, you just have to understand and be realistic about what it is. It is mucus forming. People, that's self-evident to a lot of people once they think about it, or they examine their bowel movements, and they can notice if you eat avocado, the slime content that is a part of that bowel movement versus when you're not on that, or if you're on something that's more mucus free. So yes, you got your avocados, nuts, basically, you know, anything that's fatty is mucus forming, but they can be used within the context of the transition. So with nuts, if you're using the Ehret approach, then you would have usually some kind of dry roasted nuts or roasted nuts, and combine that with dried fruits, such as I always used raisins, that kind of thing. I mean, you could do figs. To me, raisins kind of work the best, but generally you would be eating more raisins than the nuts. And so with the ratio, you're getting a lot of the dried fruit and just enough of those nuts to kind of create a little bit of stimulation and satiation. But there's also another path that I haven't talked as much about, but I call it classical raw foodism. And that's if you get into more of the soaked nuts and seeds, and you know, that raw approach, that's just another tool. I just look at that. That's another option, another tool. We don't have to get rid of the roasted nuts just because we found the raw soaked nuts. It's like, it's just another tool that can get you to another level of your transition. Yeah. And so so that's the nuts. I think I mentioned the whole wheat spaghetti. Make sure that
like
things
processed foods, like processed, even vegan foods, processed things like granola bars and stuff like that.
Yeah, granola bars. Anything that's going to be starchy like that. A big one that we recommend people try to avoid as much as possible is like white potatoes. Even if it's well baked, some people still will try to use the white potatoes well baked, but I usually say, well, just use sweet potato, because sweet potato is much less starchy. It's almost mucus free if it's baked long enough, and with a salad it eliminates well, and it's filling, so it's a good tool.
So to that, like, I know this is kind of a really broad question, but if someone were going to try to eat in a way that was less mucus forming than what they currently would be doing, what's like a sample day? Like, we're not going completely mucus free, but like, what's a sample day in like the mucus-lean towards?
Okay. So I would maybe recommend, so first we have to think about breakfast. If, Ehret recommends no breakfast plan, where you don't eat breakfast unless you really have to. And if you do eat something, then it should be fruit. So you want to avoid the heavy breakfast really at all costs. And that was something that's newer. That's not even something you go back a couple hundred years and no one was eating big meals in the morning. It's just as that was, I think I'd seen a documentary on this or something there. They were saying that basically was a marketing thing for bacon and eggs. I mean, the industry was,
sure.
They created this American breakfast mythology just to try to sell stuff to people.
Yeah.
So anyway, so if you really have to have something, I mean, you could make a juice, whether you make some fresh fruit juice, or if that's a little too much for if you're not processing the sugar yet, as well as you should be, then you could do a green juice. You could have some fruit. Now, if you are even at the way beginning and raw fruit, because I work with some people where raw fruit is really hard for them, then you can have some baked fruit. And that's an angle that a lot of people miss, especially folks that are really into the raw foodist path. They miss out on the baked bananas and the stewed apples and folks bake peaches and that kind of stuff that can really makes the fruit less aggressive, yet it's eliminates well, help you get your digestion going. So there's those options. When you get to lunch, I would recommend Ehret's, what I call Ehret's 2-course meal. And that methodology is you would have your fruit course first. So you have some kind of fruit portion of the meal, wait 15 minutes, and then follow it up with the vegetable portion, which is always going to have some kind of raw combination salad, and then maybe some cooked vegetables in there. The thing we haven't mentioned yet is the well-toasted wheat bread. The reason that you have toasted wheat bread as opposed to just regular bread that's untoasted is that toasting process actually cooks out some of the gluey properties that's in that bread. And so makes it eliminate a little bit better. And so that's something to, even with it. And even in myself, I was using, I mean, I don't recommend people do it today because there's a lot of better alternatives, but just to be transparent. So I would have a big meal like that. And my, toast, I was into the soy butter, and this was 2003, so they didn't have all these other anti-soy kind of thing, and people really weren't even anti-soy yet.
No.
In that way. So a little bit of, because I just looked at it as nut butter, because Ehret said, well, have the well-toasted wheat bread with some kind of nut butter on it, and so I was like, well, I don't really want peanut butter on it, so I'll just have the soy butter. And but anything that moved it forward, eventually it got to the point where I didn't want that butter anymore. I was like, oh no, I don't. It because it was too heavy, too oily, so I had transitioned off of it. But for people that have some of those cravings, you can get into these vegetarian or vegan periods or have items. But you're not just having a whole big vegan kind of meal without your salad, without, that's part of the methodology. Having that raw salad is going to help it eliminate well. The combination, eating the fruit first, waiting 15 minutes, then having, all these different elements are very important to the methodology. And that's how you can take something, the way that you already eat now, and kind of reconstruct how you're eating it, and taking away certain things, and maybe you're trying to replace it with something else, like if you're into white potato chips, let's take those away, and let's, corn chips, it's still mucus forming, but it's a lot better than the white potato chips.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's so, you don't hear a lot of healing systems that say, no, you can't, you have to be by the book, everything, you have to follow it verbatim. There is no transition. Like, I just love that your philosophy and Dr. Ehret's philosophy was you can do this at your own pace. You can go and listen to your body, work with your body rather than against your body. And you can do this over time, and that makes it more doable. It's not so daunting when you're diving in headfirst and changing everything. Are there foods, I kind of know the answer to this question, but I mean, are there foods that can help move mucus out of your body even when like people are still eating mucus forming foods? Like, are there foods that help eliminate mucus?
Yeah. I mean, in all the different categories. So you have from really aggressive to not very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part of the art form, because I call this lifestyle and practicing the mucusless diet an art as opposed to a science.
Right.
A lot of people want to try to bring this science kind of concept to it when it's more of an art form. If you're learning how to play a musical instrument, you can be shown the principles, but your body is different than your teacher's body. And so your embouchure, if you're doing a wind instrument, for instance, you might have to do something a little different than somebody else. And so that's part of the art form process. So with the mucusless diet, you start to realize that, okay, I've maybe that's not working for me. Let me try this. And ultimately you create your own, based on the principles of the system. You create your own path forward. And like I call the Mucusless Diet Healing System the middle path, or the middle way, because it's right in between. On the one side, you have the really kind of aggressive fasting and raw foodist. On the other side, you have the junk food vegans and the kind of you only live once but don't harm animals kind of mentality. Mucusless diet's right in the middle. It's saying let's go. But in terms of foods that can help, so less aggressive foods will be the things that make up your combination salad. You have the shredded cabbage and shredded carrots and the green leafy vegetables that you can put into that salad that creates this broom as it goes through your GI tract. And when you get good at really making the right combination salad for your body, you can really notice that how well it's going through and eliminating. When you want to be a little bit more aggressive, you can get into the fruits. And the least aggressive, which you usually wouldn't use in a detox kind of scenario, is the sweet fruits and the bananas and stuff. That's more for if you are just in your regular transitional period. But if you want to start being a little more aggressive, your subacid fruits, you got your grapes and that kind of stuff, or apples, and then the acid fruits are probably some of the most aggressive mucus eliminators, and the lemons and limes, oranges. These things are going to really loosen. And when you want the way that you can, one way to think about these items in a systematic fashion is, and the way that Ehret's call it the sanitarium menu, which is fruits in the afternoon and salad and vegetable meal in the evening. It's more advanced. You have to transition to that, but if you think about it, okay, you eat some fruit in the afternoon, and say it's maybe some apples or grapes or whatever it might be. Then in the evening, you have a combination salad or a broom salad. That fruit had throughout the day, that fruit has gone through and has loosened up some waste. Then you come through with the broom salad and broom all that waste on out. And so that's that system. The same principle when we sort of shorten the time span and put it all into one meal, into the 2-course meal, where you have your fruit, 15 minutes of waiting, followed by the broom salad. So you're still dealing with that principle of loosening things up with the fruit, and then getting rid of, kind of pushing things out with the vegetables. And then there's some other some roots and some stuff that you can get into, where the horseradish root stuff is, you can do some fun things with that in terms of having a mucosal response, and you're getting some stuff out and blowing your nose. And black radish, Ehret talks about. So there's other things, other kinds get into that are pretty can be pretty aggressive. And then many of the mucusless diet practitioners today practice lemon juice and distilled water enemas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ehret talked about water enemas, and he highly recommended using them during fasting and in the beginning of your transition diet. The one thing that our community has potentially brought to the table, as it were, to Ehret's work, is to just include that lemon juice in the enema water, and that has really changed the game for a lot of us. I know that really helped me. Is it was a lot, as long as those poisons were in my system when I started the diet, I was still craving meat for a while. You know, I would go several days and things would be good, and then I would get that insatiable appetite to go eat some meat, go get some stuff that I shouldn't eat. But once I started to incorporate the lemon juice and distilled water enemas, I noticed that addiction started to weaken and ultimately get to a point where I knew that my body could not handle those foods any longer, that they would totally make me sick. Yeah. And so that was one way that I was able to really learn how to use the system to truly transform my body. And that's why I have to warn people, like, this really works. And so you have to, because you can transition your body, but another benefit of spending time is allowing your mind to transition at the same time. Because I've met a lot of folks, and I work with a number of people that tried to be raw foodists, skipping over the transition, or they tried to get into some of these more aggressive fruit fasting things, and they might have healed an ailment, which is beautiful, but nobody told them that okay, you're done, you've healed yourself, now what? They're unless somebody's telling them, like, okay, now what, is go check out the Mucusless Diet Healing System, get on the transition diet. Some of these folks are flailing around and they don't know what to do. They go back to eating their old diet. They get real sick because they had just did a long fruit period, and that kind of thing. And so I've tried to work with a lot of those folks and say, hey, okay, that's great that you did that, but now it's okay to transition. It's okay to have cooked food if you know what types of cooked food to have and how to combine it, how to eat it. Focus more on mucus content as opposed to if something is cooked or not. But yeah, so that's
okay. I wanted to do something kind of fun, going back to the food, like if we could do some rapid fire, like your thoughts and opinion on certain foods, if I just call out certain trends and stuff. So I think this will be fun for people trying to understand more of the mucus-free foods versus the mucus-causing foods. So, there are people doing this. So give me like a sentence long answer or something, but there are people doing like the celery juice trend. Okay, your thoughts.
My thoughts is do green drinks are better. Just the holistic thing of getting into green drinks. I think in terms of longevity is better than focusing just on one item, where you can do it if you want, but in the long term, I think the green drinks and exploring just fresh vegetable juice in general is going to take you further.
Okay. How about nutritional yeast? That's a big vegan product. What do you think? Mucus causing or mucus forming? I mean, mucus releasing.
Well, that's one of those that is kind of neither. It's more neutral, but something that I wouldn't recommend all the time. If it's because it's kind of addicting. And I think it can create some complications in terms of, if you're not having good bowel movements and that stuff just sits up in you, then it can definitely cause some complications. And so I'm just weary, cautious of it. Not saying that you can't use it, but just be kind of sparing with it.
Okay, salsa.
Salsa, well, so vinegar-free salsa is cool. And unless depending on where you are in your transition, that's going to determine how hot of peppers you want to use. You can be in a certain phase where your body doesn't react well at all to hot peppers, and you just need to stay away from them because they're really not, in my opinion, it's stirring up waste more so than causing the body to properly secrete it. Because when you have the body secrete things from something that has that astringent property, like acid fruits, lemons or something, that's different than the stimulation of some of these really hot peppers. And so on that side, kind of monitor the hot pepper situation with your own body. But overall, if you can kind of steer clear of the vinegar, making your own fresh salsa to me is cool.
Awesome. Olives. How about olives?
Olives to me are cool for transitional purposes. If you can find them that aren't in some kind of toxic brine. It's hard to find them that doesn't have all kinds of added weird things in it. But if you can find them and they're, chop them up, kind of put them on the salad, they generally eliminate well. They're very, I categorize them as just very slightly mucus forming. So it's fine when you're transitioning and you want that taste, or you want something that kind of that meaty kind of vibration that they give. And so so fine for transitional purposes. If you're trying to be strict and mucus free for a period of time, then you probably want to leave those off the salad.
How about peas and legumes, like a pea or a split pea or lentil?
So I found peas to be very useful on my transition personally. So there was a number of years where I would have my salad and then my cooked kind of vegetable legume would be the peas. And so they're slightly mucus forming. If things are moving well, they're not as, they don't degrade into the same kind of slime as, say, like if you get black beans or some other beans, and you can notice it's more pungent when it's coming out. There's a more pungent kind of slime that has been created. But things in that area, that's the area of exploration that I recommend for people when you need that mucus, that mucus-lean kind of experience to combine those things with your salad. That's the direction I recommend going in, the peas and the beans and that kind of stuff.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I have one more question about the part of the book called The Magic Mirror, and also kind of facial diagnosis. Like when you work with someone, are you able to look at someone and see that they have mucus? Kind of like we mentioned, the puffiness under the eyes, and talk about the magic mirror.
Yes. I definitely, you get good at facial recognition, the facial diagnosis when you know what to look for and you're, working with people all the time. I got really good. I mean, when I combine all of those different elements, from facial recognition to hearing what symptoms they have, what kind of diet they ate growing up, what they're eating right now, for me, that's all the information that I need to give the type of recommendations that I give for the Mucusless Diet Healing System. Because really, even if I don't see a person, just based on symptoms, I can give pretty good recommendations. But when I have all of that data, then I can. That's a lot. You can do a lot with that. But that's one of those things where, just walking down the street and just seeing people, and sometimes it's painful because you're seeing the pain and you can feel the pain of people.
It's so true.
And it's just kind of like, I wouldn't even I just look at people and I'm like, man, if you just did enemas for 2 weeks and ate some more salads, they just would feel better, so it's one of those things. But as far as the magic mirror is, it's one of those diagnostic tools that can be very useful and even fun. The problem that I've noticed is with people that get kind of, if they are in their head and they sort of have that negative self-talk, or they're kind of OCD and that kind of thing, then it can be a problem because and even though Ehret says don't obsess about it, people obsess about it.
Okay.
And so they're like constantly looking at their tongue and constantly, is there mucus on my tongue? And they got the scraper and that kind of thing. And so
yeah, so explain the magic mirror for people that don't know.
Oh yeah. So the magic mirror is basically an examination of the tongue. If you open your mouth and you stick your tongue out and look in a mirror, you can see if your tongue has a lot of mucus residue all over it, or if it's clean. The reason we call it the mirror is because your tongue is connected, all that long tube from your tongue all the way down to your colon, your entire digestive tract. If your tongue is swimming with mucus, and there's a lot of mucus that's being secreted from that, you can rest assured that your colon and your entire digestive tract is filled with mucus. You know, just that uneliminated slime. And so that's where that comes in. And again, it's just more of a light kind of just, you know, remember, I say remembrance, you know, just kind of like, yeah, there's mucus here. Like Ehret says, you don't try to fast until your tongue is clean. Don't try to do something like, okay, I'm going to fast until it's clean, or I'm going to be real aggressive until my tongue is totally clean. Like that's not what you want to do. You just kind of look at it as a reference and then keep on practicing, because it takes a lot of time. Then all of a sudden one day you look at your tongue and you say, hey, there's nothing on it. And that's what you want.
Yeah. And how long have you been practicing a mucus-free lifestyle?
It's been 17 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, since 2002. Okay,
shifting gears a little bit, since we mentioned at the beginning that you are a music man. So, and I actually wanted to just hear briefly about the power of Black sacred music. Like, I just wanted you to touch on that, especially in the times we're dealing with now. I just want people to recognize there's good in the world, where all of us come together. We're all the same. It doesn't matter what our skin color is. Let's just come together. But also, I want to acknowledge that I noticed that if you take the word mucus and change the letters, it becomes music. And so I don't know if you probably already thought that, but I thought it was interesting that music and mucus are kind of like your
yeah. And there's definitely been times where I wrote the wrong word because I was on accident, where I was supposed to be music,
right?
But it's accidentally wrote mucus.
But music is part of your healing, right? Like that is healing for so many people. Talk about that.
So the African tradition of music, it was all music was sacred, and music was intertwined with the daily lives. And so some nations of ancient nations of Africa didn't even have a word for music, because it was so intertwined with the daily lives of people. The one thing they would be allowed to do in most cases would be to make music. There would be times where they would be allowed to make music, and when they were working, they had the development of what we call work songs. If you look up, Black American work songs from the slaves, that was something that infused these African vibrations into this context. Now, out of these work songs, as well as these spirituals that were developing from the slaves, you grow into this sacred music, this sacred musical form. So it's coming out of the work songs, field hollers, spirituals. Those elements come together to create the blues music, which is the most influential music by far of the 20th century. I mean, just when you're talking about a stylistic influence, there's almost no popular music around the world that you can find that doesn't have that influence of the blues, and or have been influenced by some type of music that also came out of the blues, such as jazz, that was highly influenced by it. So once you get into the 1920s and early 1930s with Black gospel music, we're fusing elements, as we often do throughout the history of Black American music. You start to fuse these styles and elements. So there's the R&B elements, or what's called, rhythm and blues back then, merging with spirituals and that kind, and starting to create what would be called gospel music, the early forms of Black gospel music. Whatever the intention is, if secular, sacred, the act of making music is itself still sacred. Kind of the story of jazz. You can be in a bar in the middle of New York somewhere, or whatever city, playing this music that has a lineage through the blues, through the field hollers and the work songs. If you listen to good blues, good jazz, you're going to hear the echoes of the field hollers, of the spirituals. You'll hear the rhythmic echoes of the music that was made in Africa. So it's infused in it. So you have folks learning about jazz that are not instructed to try and understand or immerse themselves into Black culture, or to understand the true history of the music. Whereas if you look at it from the perspective of a different kind of music, say, I know some people that are Americans, but they became really great Indian musicians of Indian classical music. When they were learning that music, they moved. One of the guys had moved over to India, and he sat at the foot of a guru every day for 6 months. He married an Indian woman. He immersed himself into Indian culture and music to learn how to become a master musician in that sphere. But that's not the mentality when you're talking about Black American music generally, because it is inviting. That's one of the distinguishing characteristics of Black music, is it's inviting to anybody that comes with respect and understanding, to learn how to control vibrations and the meditative space. When I didn't a lot of times musicians don't even realize that as you're practicing music, and if you're doing it from a spiritual perspective, what a lot of people are trying to learn when they learn these different yogic traditions and out-of-body practices and meditative things, you have to learn that. Like, you're learning that through your instrument, and you don't even know it because you're not thinking about it like that, because it's generally not necessarily taught like that, unless you have a teacher that's kind of giving you that esoteric side of it. Being clear and cleaning yourself up so that whatever is supposed to spring forth from you can. When you listen to a musician that is struggling or is a beginner or not good, what is the different from them and a really great musician or professional? One of the main differences is there's a lot of obstruction. Mm-hmm. And we relate this to, in Arnold Ehret's book, he's got a theory of vitality equals power minus obstruction, which simply means that as soon as you have too much obstruction involved in an organism, then that organism is not going to function properly. Mm-hmm. So the more you remove the obstruction, the more vitality there's going to be. So if you put a bunch of sand in a car engine, that friction creates obstruction and it's not going to work properly. Remove the sand and the engine will work fine. Yeah. So with a musician, when you can hear a musician that's not really, that's either learning or is not really good, there's obstruction that is causing them to not be able to express what's trying to come through them, you know, what they're hearing in their head, or what they think they hear in their head, or what they want to play. You know, there's that disconnect, and it takes hours and hours of dedicated practice to remove all of that obstruction, which we call practicing. When you're doing that, you remove all of those obstructions and develop your technique, develop all of your musicianship skills to get to the point where you can just let it flow, and it can kind of flow through you. The music led me to the Mucusless Diet, because I wouldn't have found it, you know, and that's kind of why it's been a tradition that when I see really people that have been successful, when I first came across the community, it was a lot of artists. It was a community of artists. And that, as I practiced it, that made sense, because I saw this is an art form. You have to understand the gradual process. Certain things as an artist, you have to get certain control over your mind to not be so impatient, to not be so hard on yourself. You know, you just have to, you know, there's certain things that you develop as an artist that is very useful when practicing the Mucusless Diet. And so once I got into it, it allowed me to develop both side by side. You know, I learned certain things from the diet that helped me in my music. I was learning things in my music that helped me with the diet, and it was a great synergy there.
How we do anything is how we do everything. That's my philosophy. It's like you change one thing and something else inside wants to change when you change the outside, and vice versa. Yeah. And also, like, the music is kind of what I coined to my clients as vitamin P: pleasure, passion, purpose. And like your words, practice. Like, practice is that vitamin P that gives you that purpose in life that goes along with a clean inside. So I think I could talk to you like all day long, because you're just so easy to talk to. But I guess I'll wrap up for now, because I've taken a lot of your time this afternoon. But how can people learn more about you? How can they find you, maybe even work with you? What's that all about?
So if you go to mucus-freelife.com, you can sign up for our Insiders Club. You get 3 free PDFs with some introductory information and menu planning information, that kind of stuff, some recipes. Then find us I'm on social media, my Instagram, Prof Spira, YouTube channel, Professor Spira, Mucus-free Life LLC, Facebook, Professor Spira, and I also have a private account, Pro Spira. We have a Facebook group, Mucusless Diet Healing System, or Professor Arnold Ehret's Mucusless Diet Healing System. I'm in the process right now of renovating my website, and so hopefully within the next month or month and a half, we'll have the new website up. Once we release the new website, we're going to institute a private membership association and a private social media area. So we'll have our own little Facebook, and people have been asking for that for a long time, because they, you know, to get off of the Facebook. And so we're going to do that. And I have a lot of resources, a lot of free resources on the YouTube channel.
We sure do.
If you're interested, you know, we have, you know, the books. You can see all our books. Got an e-course, and you know, we have all that kind of stuff is all out there that you can find on the website.
Awesome. Well, I will put all that in the show notes too, so they can click on that. And yeah, you do give away, especially your YouTube channel is just loaded with like free information, so people can just spend literally, I think, a year or 5 like going through all your videos. So right. I think you're doing great work. I think you're helping a lot of people, and that's why I love to have like-minded individuals on who are passionate about helping others. So I really appreciate that about you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we'll do it again. I'll have more rapid fire like foods for you. So
definitely, yeah, because the next time, we didn't even get into any of the controversial things
right?
today. So there's all kinds of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, all kinds of rabbit holes we could go down.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Professor. We'll talk again soon, and have a wonderful afternoon.
All right, you too.
Okay, bye for now. Promo code time. You know what? ATP Science products are some of the best supplements on the market to date that I have used personally and recommended to my nutrition clients for years. They were developed by a naturopathic doctor, and he's meticulous about handcrafted ingredients. So here's some of my favorite products. The hydrolyzed no-whey collagen protein powder is delectable. The Alpha Prime product helped regulate my hormones after toxic mold exposure. And the CordarX product helped immensely with regulating my cortisol and sleep. And I cannot say enough about their topical rubs, Subcut, and my personal favorite, the Blocky 3. So Blocky 3 is actually really great for blocking harmful estrogen just underneath the skin and preventing that buildup of cellulite and kind of the lumpy bumpies. So I've got a promo code for you for their website, atpscience.com. You get 10% off site-wide, and they have quite a few amazing products. You're going to use coupon code JODELLE, that's JODELLE, to save 10% today on atpscience.com. Go there right now and get your products.